name is Dr. Dan Eichenbaum, and I have a website. The website's on the board. And I want to start off by reading to you the credo that I operate this website under. We are living in very perilous times, but most of us don't really understand the nature of the threats that are facing us as individuals and as a nation. True individual freedom is under attack by forces far more powerful and far more resourceful than ever before. Now, if you think freedom is not important, I want you to ask someone who used to be free and has lost it, or ask someone who used to be a slave and is now free. That's the best way for you to understand what freedom is all about. Freedom is not a partisan issue to be debated by politicians in order to purchase votes. It is a basic moral right of humanity. Freedom, to me, means the absence of coercion. It's an absolute whose definition does not change based upon your worldview. Most of you believe that as American citizens, you're free. But actually, all we have left are a few scraps of liberty that have not yet been stolen by those who seek to control every aspect of our lives. That, unfortunately, is the truth. This has happened so slowly over so many years that most of us don't recognize the freedom that we have lost. Most of our fellow citizens are either uninformed, disinterested, or deceived by the false promises of a collectivist future. In the final analysis, it comes down to one statement. The right to own private property that cannot be arbitrarily confiscated by the government is the moral and constitutional basis of individual freedom. Without private property and the freedom that it affords to us, all we have left is the illusion of freedom. So when we're talking about Obamacare, the official name is far too long to keep repeating, so we'll call it Obamacare. There's one very critical question that we must ask, and that is, who owns your body? Think about that for a minute. Who owns your body? If I were to ask you off the top, you'd say, well, I own my own body. But do you really? And that's what this is all about. If you want to talk about the philosophy of Obamacare, which is what's most important, that's where we're going to start today. I could spend a lot of time going over every line, every verse, every 2,700 pages, which was never read until after it was passed, and talk about provision by provision by provision of Obamacare. But it's far more instructive for each of us to understand the philosophical basis of Obamacare so that we understand what they have planned for each of us. In order to do that, we have to go back to ancient Greece, to Plato and Hippocrates, people you've undoubtedly heard of. Plato had a belief. His belief was that as humans, our only value as human beings was to serve the Greek state. If you had a baby, a couple had a baby, you had 5 weeks after birth in order to decide whether that baby was suitable or not, whether it was the right gender, the right size, the right whatever. If not, Greek society allowed you to kill that baby up till 5 weeks after birth. In Greek society, according to Plato, The only people who got true medical care were those between the ages of about 15 and 45. Those were the people who were the most valued to the Greek government. After age 45, all you got was palliative care. That was the medical model under Plato in Greek society. Fortunately for all of us, a doctor named Hippocrates came around, and he had a very different philosophy. Hippocrates believed that life is divine, and that it is the duty of the physician to protect life from conception until natural death. That was the duty and obligation of those of us who took on the job of being physicians, the obligation to us. Fortunately for all of us, Hippocrates' philosophy has endured for thousands of years, except for a very short period of time during the Nazi regime in which medicine was bastardized to perform experiments on human beings. But fortunately for the most part, and when I became a medical student, I was asked to sign the Hippocratic Oath. And you all know what that says. Basically, do no harm. That's what most people remember. But it also says that from conception until natural death, it is the obligation of a physician to provide care. Well, how does that play in today's world? Well, unfortunately, Obamacare and the Obama administration had two primary advisors when it came to writing the Obamacare legislation. Ezekiel Emanuel, a physician, Dr. Ezekiel Emanuel, and Dr. Peter Singer. Dr. Emanuel, you probably recognize the name, is Rahm Emanuel's brother. And he wrote a book that he called The Complete Lives System. And I'm going to read a couple passages from that book because it tells in no uncertain terms what his philosophy is when it comes to medical care in the Complete Lives System. The Complete Lives Plan supports prioritizing adolescents and young adults over infants. Adolescents have received substantial education and parental care, investments that will be wasted without a complete life. Infants, by contrast, have not yet received these investments. Similarly, adolescence brings with it a developed personality capable of forming and valuing long-term plans whose fulfillment requires a complete life. The Complete Lives System produces a priority curve on which individuals aged between roughly 15 and 40 years get the most substantial chance, whereas the youngest and oldest people get chances that are attenuated. Well, there's certainly a lot of people in this room whose chances to receive medical care are attenuated. Not that we're under 15 or under 5. But that is what Ezekiel Emanuel, that's his philosophy of who should receive medical care. Very, very similar to Plato, as you can well see. The second man, Dr. Peter Singer, wrote a book called Should the Baby Live? Let's see what he had to say. Quote, he wrote a paper, an essay called Justifying Infanticide. Right away, the title should give it away, but let's hear what he had to say. Killing a disabled infant is not morally equivalent to killing a person. Very often, it is not wrong at all. Killing infants cannot be equated with killing normal human beings. No infant, disabled or not, has a strong claim to life as beings capable of seeing themselves as distinct entities existing over time. When circumstances occur after birth such that they would have justified abortion, what we call after-birth abortion should be permissible. Obviously, that you can see that that's a philosophy that harkens back to Plato. And fortunately for most of us, it's a philosophy that does not carry any kind of moral justification. But those are the two people who crafted Obamacare. You cannot tell me that their philosophy does not appear somewhere in the 2,700 pages that make up that bill. What you see before you right now is a moral battle. The battle lines have been drawn. This is a moral battle between individual rights and collective rights. Individual rights, which allows each of us to receive the medical care that we need based upon discussions with our physician. And the collective rights, which put the needs of society above the needs of the individual. Those are the people who wrote the bill. That's the philosophy of Obamacare. And that's why it is so destructive to American medicine and to American citizens, as well as to our individual freedom. I told you at the beginning that the right to own private property that cannot be arbitrarily confiscated by the government is the moral and constitutional basis for individual freedom. That is the credo that we must talk about and believe in. To our founding fathers, private property was not just our land, our home, our possessions. It was the work of our hands, the creations of our brain, and life itself. There is historical basis for that belief, isn't there? It's called the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments has provisions that support that view of private property. Thou shalt not steal is kind of obvious, okay? That takes private property. Thou shalt not covet. Why? Because coveting something is just about this far away from stealing it or taking it. Thou shalt not bear false witness. Why is that important? Well, in the court of law, if you bear false witness against an individual, he can be deprived of his property, of his freedom, and of life itself. And of course, the fourth commandment is that thou shalt not take the lives of the innocent, commonly referred to as thou shalt not kill, but what it really says is thou shalt not take innocent life. So, according to our Constitution, our founders, and the Ten Commandments, we're on pretty solid ground saying that the right to own private property that cannot be arbitrarily confiscated by the government is the moral and constitutional basis for individual freedom.